adjustments being made here.
There you go.
Whoa. I'm Lionel Alcoholic. God, it's good to be here. I got dry mouth already, sorry. Well, I told some friend of mine I was going to speak here tonight, and they showed up. So it's a great privilege to be here in this Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, which I regard as like AA 101. It's like kind of like when I first came in. And let me tell you a little bit about myself. I don't have any kind of a planned talk or anything like that. What you see is what you get, and I don't know. I didn't even get nervous, so that's I don't know what that means. But so you're going to get what's going on now for one thing, probably, and you're going to hear what Alcoholics Anonymous has meant to me. Okay, so you don't have to get through with your calculators and calculating all this kind of stuff. I'll give you some dates and times and stuff, so you can figure that out. You know, okay. So I'm from Santa Ana, okay, born in Santa Ana in 1944. So in March I'll be 75 years old, okay. The reason I do that is I'm going to bring out this little piece of paper I got. My dad was a wino. We lived in Orange by the Circle, about 2 blocks from the Circle in Orange. And I didn't know he was an alcoholic. You know, whatever. I mean, I knew he was a wino because there's wine bottles all over the house, you know. And he would drink my mom's cologne. It was some other weird name for it, some kind of water or something. Anyway, and he'd give me little jars of beer and stuff like that, and I hated it, you know. But my dad was a raging alcoholic. I loved him, you know. When I sat on his lap and felt his whiskers, I felt safe. But I never knew I couldn't predict what was going to happen. Sometimes, like growing up, you'd have to creep up on the porch to find out what the condition is, you know. And I never had friends come over, you know, and stuff like that. And so my dad lost his last job when I was like 8 years old. Got fired for drunk at George Dunton Ford. And at that time, when I was a kid, before that even, my sister and I, my dad would bring home bums, and they were bums. They weren't, you know, real bums. And so they used to live like under the bridge in Santa Ana and stuff like that, you know, back in them days. And my mom would be mad, and he'd clean them up and give them some food and that. And so I saw that helping one another when I was a little kid. And so my mom kind of had to keep the house going, and I remember some guys coming. I remember some guy named Ski, and there's 2 guys came to our house in a suit. And next thing I know, the one guy left, Ski left with my dad, and then this other guy, Burl Wing, he took me and my sister downtown Santa Ana to diner to have food, you know. So probably he took him to a meeting, you know. And so anyway, so I can't tell you how some of that stuff kind of works around in your life. And so I was always been given free rides to stuff because I lived on north part of Santa Ana on the edge. We were poor, but where I lived, all the kids in that school, their parents owned the stores downtown, bank presidents, all that kind of stuff. And so I really didn't fit. I had a weird fit in there, you know, and so I felt, even as a little kid, I felt like I didn't fit. And so, and I had a lot of fears, you know. There was a lot of violence, I mean, you know, in the house. And my dad, I never knew sometimes if I tried to turn the radio down so the cops wouldn't come get him. And if I wasn't watching, he'd knock me out of a chair or something, you know. And so anyway, it was kind of a violent deal. I was a nut kid. I used to light fires, you know. I was a thief, you know. I apologize to you people that are moral, but I was a thief. And but you know, I didn't intend to be that way. It just worked it out, you know. So anyway, why don't I keep looking at this piece of paper and that ain't going to work out. So anyway, what happened was my dad, like I said, he got fired, so my mom worked to work at a hospital from 2 to 11 at night. So my sister and I were like, run amok, and so, at 12 years old, I'm down at the Pike at like 10 o'clock at night, smoking cigarettes and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I found outside substances, testers, substance, and then later on, little crosstop substances and some little red substances and stuff. And by the time I was 16, all I wanted to do was quit school, drag race. I had a 52 Mercury flathead stick shift, and in Santa Ana, if you pulled up to an intersection and a guy revved up his motor, doesn't matter what kind of car he was in, it's on, and that's just the way it was, and so that's all I wanted to do is drag race, have fun, get a girlfriend, which I did. I met Susie when I was 16. I was drunk. I was at the bus station. I had lost my license. I got drag racing and I hit a car with no insurance. And anyway, so I was riding the bus, and so suspended my license. And she later told me that she was an Al-Anon later on. She saw me and says, "That guy, I want to fix that guy." And so we rode the bus together, and then we rode the bus to the rendezvous. Actually, I was going to the Rendezvous Ballroom, Dick Dale and the Deltones, and so these guys know half my story, that from half Corona. There's some guys there from Santa Ana that didn't raise their hands. Thanks for coming. And so then Midget and his squad from Vista over there, and then Max, and so, there's some people here I've known for a long time. Anyway, where was I at? Drag racing? Something like that, yeah. So anyway, so I got a drunk driving at 17 on the way to the rendezvous, I remember, if you've ever had a drunk driving, I remember driving a 37 Chevy pickup truck that had a big stick shift, and I was looking in the mirror and I saw this red light, and I thought, geez, aliens are following me. I was watching, and pretty soon I realized it was the cops, and so I quickly got arrested, and they took me downtown to the city hall in Newport Beach, and I promptly threw up. And I woke up the next morning, and I remember laying in a bunk. I didn't know it was a bunk at that time, but I was laying there, and I looked up, and I saw an arm. And I go, God dang, where am I at? And I was in juvenile hall, so I got 22 days. Junk drivings were a little cheaper back then. 22 days in juvenile hall, $100 fine. Had my license revoked because I'd already been on a suspended license, right? And so I think, a year's probation. And then, so my probation officer located me a job since I'd quit school at a ornamental iron factory in Orange Olive Road up there. And so I went to work there, and all these guys there were like welders that learned how to weld. It was like San Quentin, So that's where I found the cross tops and all the reds and all that kind of stuff. And so I, was with Susie. I was like breaking up with her on the weekends, so I could go do what I want. And then Monday we'd go to the park, and I'd plan about us having kids and all that kind of stuff. And we'd be okay for the next, till next weekend, right? And she was a good Al-Anon. And so, no, I don't say that because I believe in Al-Anon myself. But anyway, what happened was I became a daily drinker. I got in construction. I thought if you're a man, you drink hard, you work hard, and that's all I knew what to do. Education, my dad quit school at the 8th grade. My uncle quit school at the 3rd grade. So, hey, 16-year-old dropout, what's the big deal? Nobody cares anyway. So I quit school and had really low goals, but I was able to really, really conquer them. Yeah, I finally got a GED at 32, So anyway, that's like 40-some years ago. Anyway, quit school, drinking daily. Susie and I got married. I was 20, she was 18. She had her ovaries taken out right after we got married and was not supposed to have kids. Turns out they left a little piece of ovary for her. And so, see, that's okay. I'm 20. By the time I'm 23, I had a drinking problem, a serious drinking problem. I came home from work. It was a daily, regular deal. I stopped at Hank's Liquor Store on 1st Street in Santa Ana, got a half pint. I drank the half pint on the way home. And I typically sat in a big chair and, passed out, or felt knotted out, either that or a big old 102 40 ouncer or something, And, I was beyond the time of having fun, like the days when you spend the night on the pier fishing and you wake up stuck to the sidewalk with puke on your face. I was over all them good times, And it was just strictly me and drinking, And I told the story, these guys know, I'd get up, Sunday morning especially, I'd get up early and I'd go down to the liquor store and buy a bottle and get the paper, or I'd go down to the Carlsbad bar and I'd walk in there at 6 o'clock in the morning where nobody was there. All you could see is the flies, flying around through the smoke that was still left there, and the urine smell from the night before, and I'd go over to the jukebox and I'd play 1 Mint Julep or something like that, or Scotch and Soda by the Kingston Trio or something, Then I'd sit at the bar and I'd go, man, you poor guy, what the hell, what a poor guy you are, And there was nobody there. I intentionally went there myself, and I got no reason to feel that. My wife's at home in bed, a warm bed, but I had this self-martyr complex, like pour me, and how that is, pour me a drink, right? And so anyway, so we got married, and I'm 23. I came home from work, and by the way, my future father-in-law was in AA. His name was Al Saxon. Anybody knew him? Got sober in 1958, and he had taken me to a meeting when I was 19 at the Pomona Club. At that time it was on Mission, and I told John Keefe that one time, and he was all excited, wanted to tell Alberta, his wife, and so anyway, I thought it was really corny, people, it was 19 and people are just sitting around a park bench inside of a house drinking coffee, and this guy's, I guess he was on like death row or something, or really bad in prison and got out, and I thought it was really boring. I don't know, as a 19-year-old, I wasn't too interested in it. I was just going along for the ride because my brother-in-law that came down from Haight-Ashbury, he's the one that had a problem. That's why they were taking him, so I just went for the ride. But I did get, I guess the seed got planted, so anyway, so that I came home that day on November 28, 1967, and Susie said, Lionel, don't you think you ought to do something about your drinking? And it turned out that my boss at the lumber yard was calling, wanting to know if I had any hobbies, because I couldn't drive the forklift anymore because we got a couple of accidents there and stuff like that, and no more drinking beer in the yard, One of the guys, Totino, I worked with, he got killed. His car went off the bridge, Santa Ana Bridge on Fairview, and so drinking alcohol wasn't a good deal there, so he called, and so when she told me that, I thought, wow, I'm not much for visions, but I pictured a wedding cake with her and then a bottle instead of me, and so that was kind of like a red flag, so, especially since I don't have visions, so I called Al, and I'm not going to tell the story about those guys who were at Santa Ana Club. I know you guys want to hear that, but I ain't going to do it. But anyway, so I went to Santa Ana Club, and the only thing I can remember was this one guy, Andy Anderson, said that he got up in the morning, he went around the corner, he fought John Barleycorn kicked his ass, then he'd get up the next day and do the same thing. So that's what I remember. So I went up to Andy after the meeting. I go, Andy, I'm not a big fighter, so why did you keep going up around the corner every day and that guy was kicking you? Yeah, that's, John Barleycorn is what he's talking about, And so anyway, so that's what I remember. But At that time, that I told you about dates. Okay, so I've been going to AA since November 28, 1967. Okay, and I was on AA for a long time. Okay, there's a vast difference. There's a substitute for all that boredom, glum, worry, outside use and outside issue and all that, and it's called in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, so I was on Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was going to meetings, and I thought life was over. I was a young guy. There wasn't a lot of young guys around there. I guess there was a young people's meeting in Laguna Beach, but I didn't want to go there. And sometimes I'd go to Garden Grove, and it was really, really just a cuss fest. And people were talking like homes and all this kind of stuff. It wasn't really a big deal, very attractive, you know. But I didn't know. I just went to clubs. I didn't know that there was real meetings and real people doing real life outside, and nothing against clubs, but that's all. I never got any farther than that, you know, and because I didn't know what to do with myself. I hung out at the club because I was bored, you know. I played some golf, you know, and I wound up running into Ken right here in May or April 1973, and I was, quote, sober. I was taken clean and sober, and I was supposed to be like 6 years, and Ken was like 20, and so he thought I was the shit because I was like early young guy. There wasn't that many young guys around, so I've known him for that long. And then there's a guy here, Steve, that when I moved after I got sober, we moved to Ontario in 1st of December 1968, and my brother-in-law, who had a couple of Winchell's donut shops, gave me the opportunity to get a franchise, and I figured that way we could adopt a kid because I couldn't have kids. It turned out I was sterile from all the stuff I was using and drinking and all that kind of stuff, and so we moved there and opened a Winchell's donut shop. I wound up in 1969, adopted Becky, my first daughter, November 15th, 1969. And also I met a guy up there in Ontario called Sid Van Ornum. He was a little mailman, retired, and his wife Jeannie used to make sandwiches, cut the crust off on little diamonds for, you know, instead of cookies and stuff, you know. And Sid was a really cool little guy, and he put all the speaker names in the Colton newspaper at that time. And he was real accurate. Like if you sent a stamp to somebody, and take the stamps out of the collection and all that kind of stuff. And he got sober in a road camp in 1948, you know. So I mentioned him, and then this guy, I go back to Burl, that guy that took me when I was a kid. Later, when I moved to Santa Ana when I was 8, after we moved out of there, he was a barber, and on my paper route, he'd let me sweep out the barber shop and give me like 50 cents, you know. And so I like to remember people that really were significant in my life because I've had a lot of help. My first sponsor, Al, didn't work out having his father-in-law for a sponsor, you know. I mean, I did my inventory and I'm reading it to him and he goes, oh yeah, I used to do that stuff. I can't, you know, that was about it, you know. I mean, there's defects of character. I mean, I left half the stuff out anyway, but, you know, so it's all his fault, right? So, meantime, so I'm learning how to do this donut shop, right? Man, I made some good donuts. I still eat them. Anyway, what happened was that I got pretty bored, you know, working all them hours at the donut shop, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I went to one meeting in Pomona, and I didn't like it. And so for about a year, I didn't go to meetings much. And so I started to paint by number, you know. So my brother-in-law, Haight-Ashbury brother-in-law, comes down with a little suitcase full of goods, you know, dry goods. And so I switched, I kind of upgraded from no-dos to some other kind of stuff, you know, along with my supplementing my, you know, life. And meantime, I was secretary of the Fish and Game meeting in Ontario. I met Steve's dad, Andy Donald, in 1969. Steve was 14, and anyway, Andy was crazy, and naturally he asked me to be his sponsor, being as crazy as he was, and so I sponsored him, and he wound up using pills for the last 12 of 20 years and wound up shooting himself in the head in 1990. And but we did make some headway before he, during that time. That I spent a lot of time in AA in the half measure section, with trying to get away with something. The only thing I managed to get away with is generating more fear. And it gets progressively worse, not better. Me and him did do a successful 12-step call on a guy named Paul Westman, and he got sober May 2nd, 1972. He died at 44 years sober a couple of years ago, and I got his library, and it's a great blessing. All these guys that I know is a great blessing. Because when I first got here, when Susie said, "Why don't you do something about your drink?" I didn't have any friends, So anyway, Alcoholics Anonymous has been there for me, whether I was there for them or not. I did a lot of 12-step work during that period of time when I was in the half measure section, and 1 in 12. 1 in 12. I did a lot of 12-step work because my hours were off. I was off at like 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. Everybody else is off at 5. So they get the newspaper and they call Alcoholics Anonymous. You're probably going to get me. I went a zillion 12-step calls by myself, and I didn't get shot once. But I did have 2 people that had guns. One of them was his dad. I pulled up in his driveway, and he coming out of the back door with a rifle, and then there was some other nutball that pulled a pistol. But anyway, so what happened is I wound up losing the donut shop because naturally, if you're not drinking or using, you're going to find other ways to relieve that stress. I don't know what kind of stress, but I found it through having a couple of bookies, and I had a janitor that wouldn't mop my floor in the donut shop before he read this piece of paper. I go, what are you doing? And he goes, this and that. So, that was, I don't know, a few years later, I lost my house, I lost face embezzlement, all of that kind of stuff, and very ashamed of myself, had to move. I had a house, a car, all that kind of stuff. By now we got 3 kids. We had 2 more, and since she was pregnant with the 4th kid, it turns out that they left a little piece of ovary. And so anyway, got bounced out of that house and lost the house, moved back to Santa Ana. And man, I don't know how, I better get rolling here. So, I haven't even got sober yet. So, well, 75 years old, what are you supposed to do, right? This is AA, this is not me, right? Okay, thanks, Paul. Anyway, I had to get a couple other sponsors anyway. So, we moved to Santa Ana. I still was periodically using outside issue stuff, still going to AA, up to almost 9 years I was taking cakes, right? So if you were there, I know that guy was, I apologize, okay? I just made my amends. There's your 10th step right there, right? Okay, no. Sorry, Ken. Yeah, but I actually... half measures availed me nothing, I would say. Here I had a business, I had a home, I had all this, I had a lot, and we're on welfare, I got my kid, my son, he's like in a cardboard crate, wooden crate, for a bed that we made, and we're living in a shit part of Santa Ana, and so I went back to the lumber company, and I think I was about a year clean. And I got up one morning, it was March 31st, 1976, and I thought, wow, this is a nice day, and felt pretty good, and working for a lumber company that I hated working there. And because the reason I hated it is I resented the guy that was now he was my boss. He was a little kid, and now I'm back there 9 years later. And this guy's now my boss, and he's got money and all this stuff, and he's my boss, and I hated going to work. And I was full of self-pity, I was full of jealousy, and I was full of envy. I couldn't even hardly go to work because I had that, you know. That stuff is so negative, it'll make you drink. It'll give you resentment, you know. And I didn't realize that for like a year or so. I happened to read that in a little book called Stools and Bottles, and a light went on. I need to get rid of that, you know. So anyway, this day I wound up going to work, and I was working in Orange Park Acres up by Irvine Park, and I wound up getting pinned under the front wheel of a 1.5-ton truck. And it threw me in a hospital. I was in a hospital for like 3 months. I had 13 surgeries, and so I never got off the needle while I was in the hospital, you know. And there was a nurse there that was in AA. Her name was Sue Mall. She's passed away now. And Sue Mall gave me, when I left, she gave me a bag with 3 different kinds of pills and a book on transcendental meditation. She said, you better watch out for those pills, you know. And anyway, so I continued to do what I did from that was 3 months. All I know is we were living in an apartment in Garden Grove, and I was miserable. My kids and my wife, they slept in the nighttime. I was creeping around the house all night, you know, wanting to go outside. No, I'm going to get arrested if I go outside, you know. And then I'd stop trying to use this stuff, and I'd be itching all over, taking showers all over, itching from the inside out, you know, drinking a little Scope mouthwash. You know, I finally got desperate and went to a little bar over on Garden Grove Boulevard by the Humdinger, and it was about 1:30 at night, and I ordered a drink. You know, here I was going to AA, but I hadn't really drank, right? You know, and until later I did my inventory. I used to drink those drinks that people leave by the slot machines in Vegas. Kind of forgot about that, you know. But I didn't order the drink, right? It was there. I mean, a good alcoholic wouldn't leave a drink, right? So anyway, so that just, you know, blew my mind. So anyway, so I went there and I ordered what I hadn't drank in a long time. Ordered something. So what can I get? How about a double shot of Southern Comfort? Anybody know that stuff? Yeah, okay. Yeah, real smooth, right? So I figured I won't choke on that, you know. So I drank that double shot, and I sat there. No, I wish something like that would have happened, you know. Nothing happened. I just walked to my car, and I go, I'm screwed, you know. I mean, I don't know when after that, but I was standing in my kitchen in the daytime, and I was standing in the doorway, and I'm going, I've got to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous and raise my hand as an alcoholic. I'm going to blow my brains out, you know. And I couldn't even stand people that had depressions when I came into AA, you know. That had a resentment and what's wrong with you people, you know? And here I want to, you know, I've progressed, you know. So anyway, that was late August 1976. Could have been September, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what day it was, what day of the month. I don't know. It was Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday. I don't know what the hell it was, you know. So people go, remember your first days in Alcoholics Anonymous? No. I went to Orange Olive Club and I raised my hand. I'm a Lionel alcoholic addict. And when I came in 67, they used to go, is there anybody here for your first, second, or third meeting? There wasn't any 30, 60, 90 stuff that I know about, you know. We would, when you got a chip, the sponsor would give up, a year you'd get a pin, you know, by the sponsor, and all that, like you guys do with the sponsor talking and all that kind of stuff. But I did, so anyway, let's just say my ego was so big, I did not take a cake for 4 years, okay? I did nothing. Because I was still Mr. Ego, you know, and I wasn't humble. And so what happened is that I did do one thing, and that's that I made a decision that I wasn't going to drink no matter what, you know. And so I still went to the same meetings around all over Orange County and San Bernardino County and, you know, these guys from Corona knows me as Smitty because Steve's dad, the one that shot himself, gave everybody nicknames, you know. So I remember a guy, I was telling Lenny about a guy named Cole that changed his name to Stinky. And what a jerk. I mean, you know, I'm a jerk too. I got Smitty. Those guys know me as Smitty, but everybody else knows me as Lionel, you know. But I'm Smitty with 2 T's. My dad was Smitty with 1 T, just to make that clear. And anyway, that's it. You'd have to know why the reason for that. But anyway, so what happened is I got evicted out of a place we were living in Garden Grove and wound up in Fountain Valley. Okay, that was July of 1979. Okay. So this is about when my recovery starts, okay? So, I don't know why I keep saying okay, but anyway, I wound up going to meeting in Huntington Beach, and I says, I'm Lionel, I'm new in this area, and I could use some friends, or I don't know, something, but it's like nothing happened, you know, you could hear a pin drop, no, you know, usher everybody out, I'm standing, be the last guy standing, nobody cares, right? And so, what am I supposed to do? I keep coming to those meetings, and so next thing I know, I run into a guy. One of them guys right back there, his name's Max, and there was another guy that he was a roommate with, a little guy you couldn't understand named Steve, and Steve mumbled so bad you couldn't understand what he said. But these guys, and I'm not exaggerating, but these guys said, "Hey, we got a stag. Why don't you come over to our stag?" You know, and I never been to a stag. I didn't know what the hell they're talking about. So anyway, I wound up going to this Huntington Beach traveling stag, you know, right? So I've been still going there for like 39 years now. But anyway, these guys were kind of different, you know. They were like, hey, yeah, what step are you on? And like, who's your sponsor? And wow, I thought, geez, that's kind of really personal. I don't know. I don't know if I want to hang out with these guys, you know? I mean, Jesus, what's that? How's that any of your business, you know? And so I've been trying to dodge that for all my life, you know? So, but then I kind of went home and I kind of paced the floor and I thought, where in the hell where am I going to go? You know, what am I going to do? You know, and so I decided to go back, you know, and, you know, I said something and then somebody said, you said that last week, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, and so, who's your sponsor? And, wow, there was this one guy, Crazy Phil from Signal Hill, that I really liked what he had, you know, and, yeah, he was in a meeting with like 2 hats and 3 pairs of pants and stuff like that. Not when I was there, but they threw him in Nut House, you know. And but turns out he was dying of cancer. But he's going like 6, 7, 8, 9 meetings a week, you know, like 5 in a day, you know. And but man, that guy was on fire, man. He'd say, well, if you're not too happy around here and you think life sucks, maybe you ought to drink. You know? And it's like, Jesus Christ, you'd wake up the whole crowd, you know. And I really admired him for saying that, and I apologize for shouting. I know it's not allowed here. But anyway, yeah, I asked Phil, I go, I'm writing a 4-step, Phil. And I'm like 3 years sober or something like that, I don't know. And I'm writing a 4-step, so I need a sponsor. He said, that's really great, man. We got to do the first 3 steps first, right? So I went to his house, and he got the big book and the 12 and 12. And I'm forever grateful for him doing that because he showed me the outline of the program, you know, the allergy to the body, the obsession of the mind, spiritual malady, you know, the spiritual tools we have to have. He's showed me where the who of the program was. Back in the spiritual appendix, the willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness, you know. And these are essentials. These you got to have. It turns out that I got them. I finally got them, you know. And I'll say the reason I say that is like when I was 30 years sober, I finally understood what some of my defects characters were. But I did have the honesty, open-minded willingness, you know. Before, I didn't have it, you know. I might have had a little bit of willingness, a little bit of open-mindedness, but not very much honesty, you know. And they ask for rigorous honesty, you know. That's like your personal business, right? And so, anyway, right? So anyway, so I started going to this stag, and next thing I know, I started getting guys that want to be my sponsor, and by that time I was raised. My parents would drop me off at Southern Baptist Church, take me to Pentecostal church, all kinds of churches. I went to all kinds of churches, and I knew I was going to hell, so I kind of dropped that kind of stuff, right? So from all that learning, I pretty much knew that I knew there was a God, but I'm going to burn. You know, He knows me better than I know Him, right? So I just didn't want to deal with that. And so when AA said higher power, that opened the door for me, you know. Matter of fact, in the big book, it says that if you can be open-minded enough to just believe that there is a power, then you're probably already on your way. Matter of fact, on page 47, it says if you believe or willing to believe there's a power greater than yourself, you're already on your way. That's not even my words, you know. And when I do the second step with guys, that's what I point out. And just saying that makes me want to go back, which was my biggest problem. Is I could have stood up here and said I'm Lionel, an alcoholic, but I'd have been more described me if I said even I'm Lionel, my life's unmanageable. Okay? Because I'm not just an alcoholic. My life's unmanageable about everything. It's just that alcohol seemed to work for me, and that's what I went to, and it almost killed me, you know. And this is Alcoholics Anonymous, so that's why we're staying to that. But every other thing in the world, you know, there's like, I don't know how many different programs, 60 to 100 different programs that use the 12 steps because of the instincts gone. We want more of everything, right? So anyway, I started getting guys that asked me to sponsor them, and I started learning more about myself. You know, I went through the 12 steps. However, I got to say, no, I got to tell you, I also have some faults here. I've had Al, I've had Phil, I had another guy named Ted Calkins. I don't know if anybody here knew Ted Calkins. He said he was from the San Diego area and worked at central office, but Ted, he wound up dying too. And so I just actually, New Year's Day, lost my sponsor, Joe Porter, which on the 27th, he would be 50 years sober. And Andrew and I were driving out to Corona and got the text message that Joe died. He was going to Old Timers meeting. And fortunately for me, I'd been talking to Paul. I've been coming to this meeting here for about 8 or 9 months, and I got a relationship with Paul, and I used him for a lot of help for me. I got prostate cancer, and he helped me kind of wiggle my way through that. And so the next day after Joe died, I called Paul and asked him to be my current sponsor is Paul C. right there, you know, and I'm really fortunate to have people that came before me that do that, you know. And I'm going to get going here. I went to a banquet Saturday night. It turned out I was the longest sober guy there at 42 out of $250. 250 people. Cost $45. I ain't forgetting that. But anyway, yeah. And the speaker there, what I loved, he was all about sponsorship, and he said, you get what you get when you, help me, Andrew. You got to give it away. Oh, you got to give it away to get it. Yeah, you got to give it away to get it, you know. So my blessings, like these guys, all these guys, Corona, Steve's got a meeting in the garage in Corona that I go to once a month. We've been doing it about 12 years. Yeah, so there's like 40 guys or more, you know. And so Wes and some guys back there in Santa Ana, I go to the soup kitchen on Tuesday nights, and that's part of the Corona Del Mar Men's Stag. And there's a meeting in the Heliotrope in Corona Del Mar. There's one in Costa Mesa, the soup kitchen I had to go to. And there's one at the Newport Club. And we all three do it the same way because we're patterned after a group called the Roxbury Group in Los Angeles. And I just went with Andrew and 7 other guys to the Roxbury Group last Wednesday on the date of their 73rd year of the oldest stag in California, you know. And so anyway, what I found is that through work in this program, I went from that higher power to this joy that's here, the laughter, the love, you know, to, wow, that's good, you know, that's God, you know, good. And then I thought, yeah, a spirit, you know. Anyway, it all transcends, weaves in, and it's God, you know. And I got another book, a little book, it's either Charles or Henry Drummond that Dr. Bob really liked. It's called The Greatest Thing in the World. It's a little book like that, and it's about you can have everything, and if you don't have love, you don't have anything. And this guy was 1851 to 1897, but he was way ahead of his times, you know. And you know, there's a lot of different books that I read along with the big book, and I get, you know, the big book says there's many helpful books. You know, another one is Dr. Carl Jung really liked a book called Knowing Your Shadow, which is the dark side of the psyche. And I'm not going to get into that weird shit, you know, but I said the word psyche. Anyway, negative, positive. Okay, if you got all negative, yeah, and teeter-totter would be like that. It's all positive, it'd be like, yeah, somewhere in the middle is balance, and that's the holy place, you know. And I found through working the steps, you know, made my decision to turn my will of my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. I understand that He's God. That's about what I understand, right? I'm not. There is a power, there's a creator. I've found that, I've experienced it. I have personal experience. How I've known that is like, you know, sure, we went bankrupt. I was down and out. You know, my daughter Becky, she got brain cancer in 1997. A year and a half later, she died of brain cancer. That's when I grew my ponytail in protest. You know, it didn't work, but anyway, you know, my wife, Susie, went and had a double brain aneurysm and died in 2002, the same year I had a stroke. And, you know, I don't say that because a lot of people have a lot of stuff worse than that's happened, you know. But my faith has been on what I couldn't see. You know, like you can't see this power that resides over us all or gives us the strength. You know, but if you, just like it's an example, parallel of working the steps. It's like I can talk about it. I've got a library of books, and I did that. During those 9 years or more, even more, I've got these books. I read Goldsmith. I read Variety's Religious Experience. I did all that to tell you what it says. I never applied any of it in my life, you know. But I was, you know, smart guy, right? Thought I got, you know, I mean, got a GED, you know, but, yeah, you know, what do you want? Yeah. Anyway, I found that, that you have to do it. Every time that you do something, it increases your faith. You have, by faith, you do it, and then you get belief. You know, it says God either is or He isn't, and you either believe that or you don't. If you don't do anything, you're probably not going to believe it. You know, this guy that one guy that's new, you know, I'm saying a bunch of babble. You probably might not relate to any of it. You know, I don't know. All I know is that I found something vastly more than anything that I was ever looking for. You know, I mean, I've been coming down here for about 9 months with Andrew because. That's what I do now. I've already did that thing. I got remarried and got divorced from a gal in the program. She's like 40 years sober. And we're still friends. We should have never got married, you know. And I was so needy. I had to have somebody, and she said yes. And then, so I went tracking somebody else down after her, you know. And thank God for her. She didn't need me like as bad as I needed her, and she wound up dying of colon cancer. And then I wound up going to a therapist, you know. I went there because I had PTSD. I had like 5 people in my life died in 7 months. And I went there for that, and I wound up learning how to live by myself, you know. I mean, go figure, you know. It's like AA. You do this stuff over here, and it works out over here, you know. And but you have to do it, you know, and it's like hard. But it's like, how bad is drinking and using? How bad is it when you wake up in the morning and you go, oh my God, I hope it's not daylight, you know. Oh my, I hope it's still dark, you know. I don't want to fence. You know, I can't face what's going on, you know. The fear, you know, the stack of mail, you know, the on the door, you know, they're like, shh, you know, who's that? Did you hear that car go by? Who was that? You know, I mean, Jesus, you know, it's like, what a way to live, you know. I mean, yeah, I'm making it, I'm getting by, right? You know, and so it's just not a way to go. And here you have relief way far better than you think, and it all starts with just one day at a time. You know, one drunk talking to another. You know, and I found that my battle with stuff and that has made me who I am. I just spent 2 years just to make this talk, you know. I swear to God. I realized that this morning. You know, like 2 years ago, I found out this artery in the side of my neck is 100% blocked, you know. And this one's like 45, you know. I was sitting, I just had an ultrasound because they wanted to see an ultrasound of my thyroid. And turns out, they said, you know, why don't we take a look at your neck, your arteries? And so I'm sitting in the parking lot outside of Hogue at like 4:45 on a Friday. And I just had the ultrasound. I was sitting there in the car, and I'm texting somebody, oh, I had the ultrasound. I ain't even got out of the parking lot, and the doctor calls. That's kind of quick, you know. And he says, Mr. Smith. I go, yeah. Yeah, oh, I broke my anonymity, right? Smitty's my other name. Okay. Anyway, he says, yeah. You know, he told me the bad news. So I sit there in the car and I go, damn, my life's over, man. I won't be able to go up to Big Bear or something. I don't know what I thought about. You know, life's over, right? So I sat there, and the whole weekend I just thought about how poor guy I was and all that. God help me. You know, told everybody in the world I could, you know, so they could try to feel sorry for me. And so finally, Monday morning, I wrote. Sometimes I write in the morning, and usually when I write, I get the answer before I'm done. And I was writing, God, thank you for this day. And if you guys do write or pray, I found for me, not preaching, but for me personally, by saying thanks, my day just starts off better when I say thanks first. You know, thank you for another day, blah, 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 blah. What can I do? You know, God help me, blah. And the voice came. Not really, but what happened? Here's what I thought. Where'd that come from? I've been grinding all week, so where did it come from? Lionel, why don't you go back to how you felt before the guy told you your arteries plugged up? Oh my God, what a deal. I'm just as good as I was before I went in there. Go figure, right? It turns out that blood supply works, obviously, or I wouldn't be here, right? You know, so, but anyway, that's, I don't know, that's how God works in my life, you know. I was in Hawaii like a year ago, August, and my bypass artery plugged up. And so I go get an angiogram and said, well, you can't unplug that. Your body is bringing more blood supply, collateral arteries they call it, you know. And so it's like, wow, you know. But whatever, I'm still the same guy. I mean, thank God for modern medicine, you know. And so anyway, long story short, that's all why I'm now living at my daughter's house, the vegans. Right? November 1st. My youngest daughter, Wendy, and Javier, they got this million and a half house over in Mesa Verde and Costa Mesa. And a beautiful house. They entertain a lot. Pushed the front out 8 foot and up and all this. Anyway, they took and put a wall right off the living room and the dining room. And that dining room, it's a slider off to their backyard with a pool and banana trees and all that shit, like you're in a Hawaii or something. That's my bedroom. Okay? I live with my youngest daughter and 2 grandkids who left. One kid's in Hawaii, Jesse, and Gracie's 17. And I've got 8 grandkids. My oldest grandson, Dylan's 27, lives in Desert Palms or something like that. And bitch and tattoo artist, best you. He did my tattoo, Smitty with 1 T. Okay? And the only reason I did that, because he wanted to get a tattoo and me get the same tattoo, and he made Smitty with 1 T on his arm. And so I always spelled my name with 2 T's, you know. So Steve calls me and says, Smitty, am I supposed to call you Smitty with 1 T now? And I said, no, I'm Smitty with 2 T's. 1 T's my dad. Okay? So anyway, but I want to end with this. I don't know if I gave it any hope or not. By the way, I just went through prostate cancer. I was in a hospital last week or the week before, I can't remember, 2 days, but I'm fine. And I'm thankful that I could be here. You know, today, March 24th, 1971, is when Bill Wilson died. I saw that on Facebook. But one of my bookmarkers is Dr. Bob's last message. And I'll pull out the last 2 or 3 paragraphs. But there are 2, you know, he was in the hospital 5 out of the last 7 months when he made this talk. Oh, he was in the hospital 5 out of the last 7 months when he made this talk in 1950. Dr. Bob was. And I'm going to pull this part out of here. He says, but there are 2 or 3 things that flashed into my mind on which it would be fitting to lay a little emphasis on, is the simplicity of the program. Let's not louse it all up with the Freudian complexes and things that are interesting to the scientific mind. I don't know if you guys heard that scientific mind. Anyway, but have very little to do with our actual AA work. Our 12 steps, when simmered down to the last, resolve themselves into the words love and service. We understand what love and we certainly understand what service is, so let's bear those 2 things in mind. Let us also remember to guard the erring member of the tongue, and if we must use it, let's use it with kindness and consideration and tolerance. And one more thing, none of us would be here today if somebody hadn't taken time to explain things to us, to give us a little pat on the back, to take us to a meeting or 2, or have done numerous little kind and thoughtful acts on our behalf. So let us never get the degree of smug complacency so that we're not willing to extend or attempt to that help which has been so beneficial to us, to our less fortunate brothers. Thank you very much. It's Dr.
Let's see here. If you have a question for our speaker, raise your hand and wait to be called on. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I love the fact, thank you so much for your talk tonight.
Thank you.
I love the fact about the nicknames that you got in your group. Tell me a little bit about, I heard Diarrhea Duck, how we got that name. No, that's a different group.
Oh, yeah, it's not my group, yeah.
Never mind that.
Yeah. I could have been Diarrhea Smitty, but... Anybody else?
Suicide Days.
I think we're out of time anyway. Thank you so much.
All right. If you're new, much of what you have heard may sound strange and unrelated to your problems. Do not be discouraged. Use what you can for now and file the rest for future reference. Above all, keep coming back. There's a meeting every night of the week in this area. Our speaker will be at the podium after the meeting for you to thank. I'd like to thank John for reading a portion of Chapter 5, Chris for reading the 12 Traditions, and a very special thanks to Lionel for being our main speaker. All right, with that being said, I'd like to ask Debbie G. to lead us in the Lord's Prayer.